Hi everybody, Lindsay here from Positive Performance, the Mindset Coach Academy, and I just wanted to pop on real quick and talk about our cheat sheet. I'm going to tell you how to get, you can see my ring light, the top 7 ways to develop tough, focused, and resilient athletes. And the reason that I decided to get on today is I just got off being interviewed on a podcast, and you know, when people interview me, they always want really actionable things, which I love because I love giving actionable things that coaches can implement immediately. So I just wanted to go over this cheat sheet and remind you, if you're new to our community or you downloaded it once and you forgot about it, this resource really has, I like to call them some of the low-hanging fruit of mental training. These are things that you can easily implement in a quick way. You could really implement all 7 of these steps, but certainly you could pick and choose a few and implement them really easily into your existing practices. And I think that's really important, right? Mental training can be, you can do it in big ways, but you can also do it in small ways, and you can get some momentum with some of the smaller things, I think, pretty early on, and get some buy-in and kind of build up your confidence teaching it and that sort of thing, and not necessarily take more practice time either. So the first thing that I want you to think about is really teaching your athletes to breathe. And this sounds very simplistic, of course, but as we all know, sports really at any level is stressful. And it's by design, right? It teaches us to grow and stretch and face our fears and all those sorts of things. But oftentimes athletes really get into that fight or flight response, and you know, there's so many downsides to that. It's good to be activating that, but there's so many downsides to it when it gets too much. And breathing is the way for us to calm our nervous system. And it's very actionable. It gives them something concrete to think about. And what I always like to say is a little stress helps us, but a lot of stress makes us weak. And so really being able to teach a way to manage that. And I think, you know, in this podcast, I'm just talking to the host, and he's a coach as well. And I said, this is something that coaches need as well, right? We all get emotionally flooded or emotionally intense, like when there's a bad call from the ref. And so teaching, and this is what I teach my kids too, like teaching people to take deep breaths. Sounds so simple, and yet you can get sort of a lot of bang for your buck with teaching that. Step 2 is celebrating failure and risk. And you guys all know I am practicing what I preach. I'm walking the walk, and I want you to as well. And I think this is one specific place that you can. We cannot just sit back in our comfortable, safe spot and talk about mindset work and mental training. We have to be an example of what is possible as coaches. And one way we can do that is really talking about failure and risk, and talking about our own failures and talking about our own risks and the places that we've stumbled along the way. Because if we want our culture to change, we have to be the ones that set that example. And so this can be showing your own vulnerability. You might think, well, my athletes don't care, but like they are looking to you to set the tone and set the culture. And so being able to talk about, the places that you've screwed up gives them that space to say, you know what, I'm human, coach screwed up. I can screw up too, and it's okay. I think also with that is making sure that failure is a part of the culture in an actionable way, like making sure that you're probably already doing this, but then talking about it, like doing drills that are designed for them to fail and then talking about it. And I think that's that second part sometimes people miss, is we do drills that we screw up on or we fail at, but we don't actually talk about the, emotional or psychological reaction to that. And talking about, and that's where you can bring in growth mentality and the Carol Dweck stuff and all that. So making sure that failure is a part of your culture, really. So that's step 2. I see some people popping on. Say hi if you're on live. And I'll put the link to download this, but if you're just sort of scrolling and you want it real quick, if you just go to our website, positiveperformancetraining.com, and click on I'm a Coach, it'll take you directly to this download. All right, number 3 is encouraging positive self-talk in an actionable way. So a lot of times coaches will talk about self-talk, but then we don't talk about how to correct it. So you might say, well, let's be positive today. Or, you can almost tell what athletes are saying to themselves, but bringing that attention and awareness to that. So, if they do screw up a drill, and this is especially great in like small group things or one-on-one, skill work off season, and they screw up on something, you can tell they're getting frustrated. That's the moment you can say, what are you saying to yourself right now? And they may or may not be honest. And if they're not honest, maybe you can give an example of what you might say at certain places, certain times, and talking about how it's okay to be hard on yourself, but what would be maybe a more productive way of talking to yourself in that moment, and letting them self-correct, so that they have that sort of real world. It's not just an abstract thing like be positive, rainbows and unicorns, and even when you screw up, you should be really happy. Like that's just all bullshit, right? And so giving them that like, okay, this is how you're talking to yourself. Is that truly the most helpful thing you can say to yourself right now? And if it's not, what can you say, still having high standards, that's more productive? And then they're really learning in an actionable way in that moment when they need it, right? It's not some abstract thing they learned about one time. Number 4 is don't pretend losing shouldn't hurt, but make improving the focus. And this is, I think, particularly difficult when it's easy, when things are good, to just sort of gloss over it. And that's where it's not about winning or losing. It's about the process of improving. And so always you're going to go back to that. And many of you do this already, of course. But it can be hard because you're emotional about winning and losing too. And so just remembering that it's always going back. And it doesn't mean you don't care if you lost. It doesn't mean you can't be happy when you win, but improving the focus all the time. And, really talking about the sort of non-negotiables that maybe you've come up with in the Coach's Guide to Achieving Great Practices of like, we are the team that outworks our opponent, or we are the team that shows great leadership all the time, or we are the team that, is positive even when it's really hard, or all these different things that you've probably come up with ahead of time, making sure that that's the focus, win or lose, and keeping that really kind of sacred. Number 5 is teaching positive affirmations and how to visualize realistic goals. And this is where, again, I think your experience as an adult can be really helpful when it talks about when you're talking about growing and stretching and dreaming, but talking about setting high goals for yourself. And you might think, well, again, as an adult, they don't really care that I want to buy a new house, or they don't really care that I'm looking for a new job. But I have noticed myself as an adult that talks about non-athletic goals and non-athletic stretching myself, that athletes really like to see that I'm doing things that are scary, and I'm doing things that are uncomfortable. And I think often as coaches, we feel like we have to kind of sort of step back and not show that part of us. But talking about goals and even not reaching goals can be really helpful, and talking about setting realistic goals. Because I think often we have like the pie in the sky goals, or athletes feel like, oh, I can't set a goal because what if I don't reach it? And so obviously neither one of those extremes is great, because neither one of them are really, they're not realistic. They're not actual goals where you're getting your subconscious zeroed in on achieving it, and you believe that it can happen, even though it's going to be hard, and you're stretching yourself to get to it. And so that's a really important part of it as well. And if you don't know what to do with that, the Braver method talks about affirmations and visualization. Now, our Braver is a paid product, but it's one of the best bangs for your buck, I believe, that you can get to start mental training in a really simple way. And it gives you just so many different resources, but then it compacts it into an easy pre-practice routine. And so that was something I would highly recommend if you haven't done the Braver. People love it. Number 6 is helping them create a mistake ritual. So again, we're talking about athletes in many moments that don't know how to react, and they're going to get overly emotional. They're going to start thinking a lot. And so whatever sport you're coaching, in that moment when athletes make a mistake, what do they do? I was just talking on this podcast. So many athletes go on the negative train, and you see it happening. They make a mistake and they are gone. You might as well pull them out of the game, because they are not recovering, because they don't have something in that moment that they can grasp onto. And this is like the number one question I get when I speak. Lindsay, what do I do when I miss a penalty kick? What do I do when I, miss a free throw? What do I do when I turn the ball over? What do I do and it's like, you don't get in better shape on game day. This is something that has to happen ahead of time. So you are going to work on it as a team. You are going to practice it in practice outside of competition. So when you're getting competition, your athletes have something to do in those moments, because right now they don't. They do not have an anchor that they can latch onto, something to do to allow them to stay in that moment and then move past that moment. Right now, they just, whatever their brain does, it does. So, and if you don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to mistake ritual, we have a free masterclass. After you download this free cheat sheet, it'll ask you if you want to join us for the Braver, and then it'll ask you about the masterclass. So if you get into that system and get the cheat sheet, you'll get offered all these other things. Some of them are free, some of them aren't. But the masterclass, we actually talk about creating pre, during, and post-competition routines, and in particular, the mistake ritual. So I definitely encourage you to listen to that masterclass, Game Face Inside the Minds of Great Competitors, if you haven't, because it's just chock full of competition mental training that you can implement really easily for a ton of focus and insight into your athletes. Okay. Last one. Teach them how to visualize and do it as a pre-practice warm-up. So again, in college, I was running from 3 classes to lunch to study hall to practice, and boom, I'm supposed to be, focused. And of course, sometimes I was, and probably sometimes I wasn't. And we spend all this time on the physical side, making sure our athletes' muscles are warmed up and they're ready to go. And we just think their mind's going to follow. And sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And we teach the Braver, like I said. It's a 5-minute, 5-step method that we've developed over 12 years. And it really is a system that takes them through visualization and breathing and affirmations, and it's all in one. So I definitely encourage you to look at that. But regardless of whether you do our system or not, I truly believe that a pre-practice mental warm-up is so important. Because let me ask you this, how many times do you start practice and the first 20 minutes is a complete waste of time? Because nobody's focused, everybody's thinking about their boyfriend or their girlfriend or what they're gonna eat for dinner or blah, 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 and they're not actually in the gym or in the pool, they're somewhere else. And so getting them focused on why they're there, what goals they have and what they want to accomplish, that they can accomplish those things, that they're focused on the task at hand. It's like magic. Getting their mindset there, ready to practice, pays huge dividends. And on the back end, what I believe is equally important is not just that one practice, but teaching them overall that they are in control of their mindset. And that it's important to your team and to your program. And that it is something that they can and should work on regularly. In the same way that we warm up physically, we warm up mentally, because the mind is that important. And when you send that message, then if you're going to do any kind of mental training, subsequent mental training, you've created a culture where it's acceptable and it's, people are used to closing their eyes and taking deep breaths together. You've also made it culturally acceptable to talk about difficulties and mental challenges and psychological barriers and all these things that are scary and vulnerable to talk about. And so I believe that single thing of having a pre-practice warm-up pays huge dividends, not only in that day and not only in your culture, but for them as young people, that they're understanding how powerful their mind is and that they are in control of it. That message in and of itself is gold. So again, I just wanted to pop on and go over this in case you're new to our community. We've actually had a ton of new people join, so thank you and welcome. And I hope this little mini training was helpful for you as far as, again, like the low-hanging fruit of things that you can implement really quickly into your existing practices. And of course, you can get this free cheat sheet. I'll put the link below, but if you go to positiveperformancetraining.com and click on I'm a Coach, it'll take you directly to this cheat sheet that you can download instantly. So any questions about any of these 7 steps, put them below. I'm always in the group checking in, and we have a great community of other coaches that'll chime in too. And many of them have done the Braver, and many of them love it, but could also answer any questions about how to implement it and little tweaks that they've made. So this is a community, and this is all this stuff is our living tools that we tweak and we change and we grow. So feel free to ask any questions below. Everybody have a great day. Bye.